Why am I making a speakers video? I'm a bit on a speaker journey. The reason for that is, in addition to making music, I also listen to music, and oftentimes I'm listening to my music, so I actually know what I'm not hearing, which isn't something you can always say. So I ended up in a situation where instead of not knowing what I'm not missing, I in fact do know what I'm not missing because I'm putting something into a track and not hearing it on the other side. In all fairness, I refer to this room as the mix wrecker. So it's not just my music that maybe doesn't get its best foot put forward in here. Sometimes it's other people's music as well. But in those cases, I didn't know what I wasn't missing. In most cases, I could get decent clarity in here if I turn the speakers up loud. That, I think, is the case almost universally, except for when you're talking about distortion. But in terms of hearing all the little details, you turn up the volume, everything sounds better, louder. But I also wanted to be able to listen at cocktail party levels in here. And when I did that, I felt like I wasn't getting clarity. I was just getting bits of instruments poking out and peaking, and it wasn't a satisfying listening experience. So my initial goal on this whole sound system journey was to be able to listen to music quietly. Of course, as I started doing more research, I started getting a sense of other things or other sort of ambitions I might have in terms of what my listening environment might be. Then came Japan. Japan has this notion of jazz bars or listening kisa, where they just buy fetishy stereo systems and amplifiers and have a huge record collection, wipe every record down before they put it on the turntable. And oftentimes the rooms are treated and they're not very big rooms. So you have these situations where you have like a pretty small room with some pretty big speakers and everybody speaking at conversational or lower volumes. So it makes for a pretty good listening environment. They're not all jazz bars. There is a noise music bar in Shimokitazawa, which is, again, a pretty small room with decent sound treatment. In their case, they were using these little Altec Lansing speakers. I think they were from the era when that was considered a good thing. I don't really know much about them. In the case of the other jazz bars, like Tom's in Shimokitazawa and another one, the name I'm blanking on right now. Tom's had these JBL vintage speakers, and they sounded amazing. You feel like the instruments are just leaping out of the front of the grills at you. Every sound is like an event. And the other listening bar we went to had tannoy corners, which are like an absolute unit. It is a piece of furniture. It's a big wooden cabinet this big, with like a 15-inch speaker right in the center of it, and those are off in the corner of the room. And the same thing, you felt like you were walking around on stage with the band, weaving your way through the instruments when you walk through that bar. I don't expect to get anything like that in here. First of all, I don't have a perfect listening environment. The rooms are weird shapes. Second of all, boy, that's a big piece of furniture, which, by the way, are $5,000 a pair minimum. I've seen them for more. And third of all, I don't listen to jazz. We listen to techno here. So I think it's worth pointing out that oftentimes the jazz recordings that really shine in these settings are live recordings. That is a very different creature from, say, a heavily produced techno track where, you see a ton of compression and instruments aren't really meant to stand out in solos the way maybe a jazz performance will. But it doesn't mean it's not worth trying to put the song's best foot forward. So this whole notion of audiophile is called a controversial topic. The guy from Steely Dan says that audiophiles don't listen to music, they listen to speakers. Guilty right now. I can certainly admit to doing a fair amount of that right now. Part of it because it's fun. It's a hobby just like any other hobby. And part of it is because I, in the end, like to land on a solution and stop processing and overthinking it and just listen to music. There'll be a number of topics I don't cover here. Really, I'm just going to talk about speakers. I'm not going to talk about listening position, which the audiophiles geek out about on. I'm not going to talk about speaker position, although those are both things I'm doing. I'm thinking about where the speakers are, I'm moving them around, I'm thinking about where I'm sitting. We're not going to go into that. We're really just going to talk about these wooden boxes around me. I'm not talking about speaker wires. I am not at the point where I think that's a thing, and I hope I never am, because it just sounds ridiculous to me. And we're not discussing room treatment. I do what I can in here, but it's a living room, and I'm not going to be, well, I was going to say I'm not putting up bass traps, but am in fact putting up bass traps. I'm not putting up clouds. There you go. There's something. There's a length I'm not willing to go to. So there's a lot of topics we're not covering. There are a lot of things we're not doing. Today I just want to talk about these boxes, their characteristics, what I hear when I listen to each one of them, and what I'm hoping to get out of this thing when I'm done. So what I'm listening to in this room is mostly techno. I listen to freak folk and ambient and some rock and experimental music in here, but mostly I listen to techno, and it's the techno that I mostly care about in terms of really what it sounds like. That's where I'm listening to the entire frequency spectrum. I'm thinking about things like clarity. I'm thinking about things like soundstage, bass is a big deal. So mostly we're going to be listening to techno for the purpose of this conversation. The mixes I listen to are from YouTube. I like the Wax to Wax channel. I listen to her Boiler Room. I listen to the Monument podcast. Off the top, I accept that the compression on YouTube is not kind. I know this for my own music. I know this for their music, so I'm just sort of accepting that. I'm also streaming Bluetooth. It just adds another step of compression and digital conversion to the whole process. So kind of accepting that. The alternative is getting up, walking over there, sitting down, getting up, walking over there, sitting down. You know, the reality is I'm just not going to do that. Artists I'm listening to nowadays include Kyoka, Cio D'or, Mike Parker, and Neel. There's been some voices from the lake going on in here. I listen to Woody 92, and lately I've been listening to a fair amount of Alva Noto, which has been on heavy rotation, emphasis on the heavy, if you've ever heard it. I'll put a few links in the either description or comment to some mixes I like that I think sound good, and maybe you can play the game at home as well. So I started this journey by comparing the speakers I already had to what I was hearing on my headphones and what I was hearing in the studio. And I found that the sounds on the speakers were missing something. What I had to begin with was these Bose speakers, which I've had for a long time. And I also had a Polk tower, kind of an unremarkable Polk tower. The one speaker against the other, no real clear difference. In the end, I like the Bose because I like how they sound loud. I think the Polks, maybe they didn't sound as good loud. The Bose have this feature where you can see the tweeter there pointing out at an angle. So those two point inward, and there's actually a tweeter in the back of each of them that points outward. So they get this ricochet off the sidewalls width thing. In my experience, I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes, although I guess I can't say I've ever heard it without. But the Bose don't have a ton of highs. And typically, if you're going to get like a sense of space, you're going to get it from higher frequencies. In the end, maybe they're doing what they can, and maybe it would be much worse without those speakers. In any case, I found a buyer on Facebook Marketplace for the Polk Towers. I didn't need two sets of unremarkable speakers. I took that money, which was $55, and I picked up these guys from a thrift store for less than $20. I had them for a little while and then went and replaced the capacitors inside. If you don't know, the capacitors inside are used to set the frequencies that get sent to each individual speaker. So it's kind of a built-in filter, like an analog filter. In this case, you've got these two high-frequency speakers, this other high-frequency speaker, and then this bass speaker. So the capacitors inside try to say that the frequencies that are sent to those specific speakers are the frequencies those speakers or drivers are best able to produce sound for. It also means that when you send a sound to this speaker, one frequency or one set of frequencies goes to one speaker, and then different frequencies go to a different speaker. And the reason that matters is because if you had the same frequencies coming out of two different speakers, you get a comb filter effect because the speakers are not on the same axis. So the sound's coming at you from two different places and then mixing. For what it's worth, these Kenwood speakers here are known as a kabuki speaker, which is to say they've got a lot going on. For my purposes, I actually think they sound pretty good. The knob here for the high frequency lets you say dark, normal, high, and then glitter. You know, the more highs you get, the more of a big stereo effect you get. You get a notion of a sound being placed sort of individually in the room. If there's a hi-hat right here, it's right here because that's where the high frequencies are, and those are really good at locating a sound in space. And maybe it's me, maybe it's the speakers, maybe it's just music in general, all those highs get irritating after a while. So I love sitting here and going, oh, that sounds cool, and it's so wide, and listen to the articulation and the detail and the sound. In the real world, in real life, I turn it down to normal, so I'm not getting a ton of that articulation and detail out of these. The other knock I have on these is that they distort when you turn them up. They don't distort to the point where they're rattling or anything, but like if you're doing critical listening, which we are, and if you have an ear, which you as a musician do, then you'll hear it. You'll hear just sort of fuzzy mids and fuzzy bass as things get louder and louder. And that does take some of the fun out of listening. I'm trying not to consider the attractiveness of a speaker. Right now, I just want to talk about how it sounds. I'm not trying to make this more complicated by talking about wood grain or whether I like the design overall. They're not going to be a giant piece of wooden furniture. Hopefully, they're going to disappear into the backdrop after we're done with this whole evaluations. That all said, I think these grills on the Kenwoods are really cool. I think it's a great looking grill. It's plastic. It doesn't look like plastic to me. It looks like wood to me. That all said, it's not enough reason to hang onto a speaker just to look at it. I'm going to have these guys posted up on Marketplace. I'm going to let them go because they need to finance the next step in this operation. At this point, I should mention that the Kenwoods and the Bose stacked on top of each other was actually kind of magical. With the Kenwoods, with the sparkle turned to one down from the highest, and the Bose sitting on top of them, you have to set the Bose back a little bit because you want the actual speakers to be kind of the same distance away from you. It's not great. You're still going to get that comb filtering, but you do what you can, and you hear it, and you get this beautiful wide, more than the sum of the parts sound, and that's pretty appealing. But I'm not trying to have a whole stack of speakers in here. I picked up a subwoofer at Craigslist. It was under $20. It's a nice subwoofer. It's coincidentally a Kenwood. It has lots of features. It's auto power, so it's not just on all the time. It turns on more or less automatically. There's a volume knob. There's a filter cutoff knob, so I have it just grabbing the last octave, maybe somewhere between 30 and 70 hertz. You definitely feel it. You get a nice little bump at the bottom of the spectrum. You can hear it. In an ideal world, we wouldn't need that though. So subwoofer is in here just as part of the exploration. I think I'll probably end up selling it on Marketplace or something when all this is done, and hopefully getting my $20 back. So the Klipsch speakers here come into the story because I was kind of curious about this horn thing. A lot of Klipsch speakers have horns. It's kind of where they maybe have their identity. Going back to, it must be the 1960s, they had these giant boxes with these big rectangular horns on top of them. People feel strongly about them one way or the other. For my purposes, I'm chasing that dragon of the instruments leaping out from the front of the speaker, and the horns seem like a great way to get there. The Klipsch speakers themselves, of course, there's a whole product line in 50 years. I'm not about to spend $5,000 on a set of speakers, new or used. I also don't expect that this is where the story's going to end. So I just tried to be smart about finding a good value with the features I was looking for from a Klipsch speaker. And where I landed was these guys. I got them for a deal on Facebook Marketplace. They're in decent shape. The cabinets are in good shape. The cones are obviously in good shape. And they sound good. The features I was looking for was I wanted bass, I wanted clarity, and I was curious about this horn. What I got is these two are the bass speaker. Then there's a port in the back, like a hole, that also lets more bass out. In my ideal world, I think that port would be what they call a passive radiator. And a passive radiator is just another speaker, but there's no magnet. So when the air pushes on the speaker, it kind of dampens or filters the frequencies instead of just having a port. Some of the downsides with the port is usually they're in the back, so your speaker placement matters. Too close to the wall, it's basically not going to let the bass out. Sometimes they put these ports on the front, and then you can have another problem, which is you actually hear the air pushing in and out of the port. So that's where a passive radiator might be a nice move. In this case, I ended up with a horn, two woofers, and a bass port in the back. In general, I like these speakers. I do think they're an improvement. They're clear all the way from very quiet. You can listen to, at low listening levels, you hear the same instruments as when you turn it up. And I think that's great. The mids are clear. They don't get muddy when you turn them up. I like that. What they don't have is they don't really have that sparkle. I don't get a sense of a big wide sound stage. You don't feel like the instruments are being placed throughout the room. It's an improvement over the Bose. Just on that sparkle situation. It's nowhere near what you get with the Kenwoods, but the overall listening experience is an improvement. So for now, the Klipsch are staying. The Klipsch also mean that the sub can move on to its next home because they definitely eliminate the need for the sub. They don't do that last little growl that you may get, but honestly, I don't need that in here, and it's very satisfying from a bass level in every other way. I suppose I should mention this guy at this point. In many ways, this is the one to beat. This is a little JBL Bluetooth speaker. It's got, I actually don't know what's in it. It sounds great. The bass is good. I use this as the soundbar for the TV because we listen to a lot of music on the TV. And dialogue's clear. The bass is good. Everything's clear. It's really remarkable considering the size and price. So why bother with all these, right? So it is really remarkable, but you don't have that heft. You definitely can tell like there's a small speaker. It fills the room nicely, but in a very different way. So I still think this is a worthwhile pursuit, although, you know, if I just had this thing on a desert island, I would not be mad. So next steps here are I'm still trolling Facebook Marketplace looking for deals. I'm not about to spend a ton of cash on some fetishy collectible speaker. I am about to spend a small amount of cash on a fetishy collectible speaker with problems. Maybe the case is messed up or the cones are messed up and need repair or something else like that. Maybe the crossovers need to be repaired. Those are all good ways to save. There's also still thrift stores, although nowadays I have seen some people with amazing luck walk away with amazing speakers for amazing prices. I have not yet been those people, but there's still time. In terms of what I'm looking for, you know, those cool JBL speakers from the Maxell tape ads. I'd love to hear what they sound like in this room. Again, they're super fetishy. I'm not sure I'd be able to find a deal, but if I do, I'm here for it. I'm still curious about what other Klipsch speakers can bring. I'm always looking for the Heritage line speakers, which are the Heresies, which I'm not sold on, but the Forte 4s I'm curious about. The Klipsch Cornwalls and the Klipsch Lascalas all sound like they have decent bass and ridiculous horns. If I was able to find one of those which needed love, or maybe somebody was just really looking to get rid of them, I'd certainly be into that. The other direction to go here is with the smaller, more modern speakers. I've always been a believer that the best sounding speaker is actually the newest speaker, and that's obviously not true, but it's not a bad rule of thumb. So I'm keeping my eyes open, or eyes out. So I'm keeping an eye out. For ELAC speakers. Either the first generation Unify line looks like it would bring clarity plus bass plus a nice sound stage. Also the third generation ELAC, probably anything. They have 1, 2, 3 levels of tower speakers. And I think probably anything in there would be a step up from where I am, and also give me a sense of what I'm missing in terms of what a modern speaker with modern materials would bring. The other speakers that are interesting are the SVS has gotten into the speaker game, and Klipsch actually make a what they call a reference line, so they're in that more familiar narrow modern tower format. They still have the horns, but it's more of a philosophical match to the ELAC speakers or the SVS speakers that I was talking about. So that's it for now. I appreciate you getting this far in the video. Next time we'll be back to your regularly scheduled techno and Eurorack programming. The thing that's kind of holding me up from doing a lot of camera down Eurorack videos is they're really difficult to shoot, number one, and have it look good instead of just a big blur of wires. And the other thing is, you know, the magic moments don't come when the camera's on. The magic moments come when you're not really thinking about it too hard and not trying too hard. So it's hard to get the best shots and the best music in the music videos, but we're going to turn our attention back to that. I have a new patch going that's giving nice minimal techno vibes with lots of different feels, so I'm looking forward to doing a track from scratch with that patch and getting it recorded on video and talking about what makes it tick. So we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.